All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Wolf, and I'm recording today not from Woodstock, New York, but from Kingston, New York, Woodstock's neighbor to the east. And I'm recording in my new recording studio and office at the Center for Photography in Woodstock in Kingston.
Yes.
At their new home on Dederick Street. They actually have two running spaces right now, one on Broadway and this new space that they're building out on Dederick Street that they gave us space for. And I want to thank Brian Wallace, the executive director of CPW, and my friend, and Sarah Danziger, the education program manager at CPW, also a friend, who have been really wonderful about welcoming PhotoWork into their home space and have just been so generous and gracious. We love those guys, and I think there's a lot of synergy between what CPW does and what PhotoWork Foundation is doing. CPW has been around for decades, and we are just babies learning to walk. But I think we have a lot to learn from them, and they've been just wonderful about sharing knowledge and space, as it turns out, with us. So looking forward to a long and wonderful relationship with Center for Photography Woodstock in Kingston. They do so many amazing things, so check out cpw.org. Yeah, so, and my carpenter in crime, because...
Crime's a good word.
That makes literally no sense, but... I
don't know, I feel like
my
when we were cutting...
carpenter in crime, I know what... I have to think
we made
about
a little
that for
bit of a
second.
mess.
I know, my carpenter in crime. I got it. I'm going to have to really think about that one. Why do I always have to overcomplicate it? My co-carpenter, the guy who built out the space with me, you all know who I mean, for God's sake. Mr. Michael Chauvin-Dalton. Hello, Michael.
Oh, hello. Yeah. I mean, CPW, thank you. It was great being there, putting this room together, which is now a new home for you to record in. It's fantastic.
Yep. Love it. Michael, we have so many things to... Okay, I don't want to overwhelm. Nobody gets scared. Not that many.
That's right. Don't fast forward.
No, I think we have 2, 3 at the most. Take it easy, everyone. Just 3. 3 things to go over before we get to the show. I will just say right off the top, because it's so exciting, that our guest for today's episode is the amazing artist, photographer Jim Goldberg, who I've wanted to talk to for a long time.
Yes.
Jim resisted. He wasn't ready to talk, but he resisted graciously. But he has a new book out called Coming and Going that's real tour de force, a real, I think, going to become like other books of Jim's, a real classic, something that everyone feels they need to have in their library. It's incredibly moving, incredibly engaging, really accessible but complex, and we talk about that a lot in the episode. Yeah, this was just a joy for me. But let's back up a little, and then we'll get back to Jim. The first announcement I want to make today is an announcement I've been waiting for this day for a long time, which is the foundation went through a call for applications for our first fellowship program. We got over 200 applications. Out of that, we chose 3 people to be our first fellows for our fellowship program, which is a 6-month mentorship program, along with a lot of other goodies. And I'm thrilled to say we have chosen Molly Darcy, Will Suter, and Brandon Holland. We are so thrilled to have them as part of the PhotoWork family. Molly, Brandon, Will, We can't wait to start working with you. And they will be working with incredible mentors, Andrea Modica, Doug Dubois, and Christine Potter. For more information on who was paired with who and to look at the work of our fellows and learn more about them, follow us on Instagram and also go to photowork.foundation. This will all be on the website. It's thrilling.
Yeah, your inaugural event. I mean,
yes.
That's fantastic.
So I could talk about them a lot because I seeped in this right now and the pairing of fellows and mentors. But switching gears a bit, one other thing I do want to mention as we come to the end of the year is we really need and would appreciate, we've said this before, we've done this before, but the support of you all, our listeners. I'll reiterate again what I've said in the past, that we know how many of you are listening.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And thank you. Yes.
And yes, and we love you and we feel connected and like we're all part of the same community. But we really need more of your support. I'm going to be honest. I think what happens is you all hear this message from me and Michael and you think, well, I'm going to go make work or I'm going to go to my job or I'm driving in the car and obviously can't do it now, or I'm on a walk, or I'm in my studio, or I'm going to pick up my kids, and someone else will do it, and it's okay if I don't do it. That's not great. That's not helpful to us. I'm just urge people to take it a little bit more seriously. We're not asking you for any amount of money that would create any sort of even tiny speck of a hardship for you. That wouldn't feel good for us, but anything you can do, $10, $20, $50 if you're feeling crazy, $100. But $10 from many of you would really feel good to us and make a difference. So
that's a visit to Starbucks. Come on.
Exactly. Please don't take us for granted. We are a foundation and we rely on support. So even if you're driving in your car right now, please, when you get home, it takes 3 seconds. Everything is tax deductible. Please just go to the website and donate. I'm begging you, a year-end donation would really make a difference in the ongoing, continued success and strength of the foundation, which is the podcast, the fellowship, and there will be more things to come. The foundation will continue to grow and support our community. Please be a part of that. I'm urging you to not just pass it off to the next person, but be proactive yourself. And as my mother would have said, be a mensch. And everything that I use online that asks me for a donation, I do donate. If I use it and get something from it, I donate. It's the right thing to do.
I donate to Wikipedia. I just want to say that out loud.
I do too. No, Michael, I do too. Because I use Wikipedia all the time. And so when they ask me for a donation, frankly, I feel like it would be wrong. And again, I'm sorry, audience. I don't mean to sound holier than thou, but I do. I feel like it would be wrong not to donate because, they're providing me a service that I use. And for the most part, our listeners are getting a lot of content for free. And we're happy to do that. And I don't think giving $10 or $25, you're still basically getting this for free, right? Because the amount that we're giving you doesn't compare to $10 or $25. But yet, if a lot of you do that, it really makes a difference for us.
Yes. And also, shows the board, right? We have support out there. Yeah.
Right. No, it's good. It's good for absolutely, without a doubt.
I mean, anyone who's ever been in the fundraising world knows that donations beget donations because people like to see that support, and then the board can also fundraise off of that as well.
Yep, absolutely. So be a part of the team. Okay, thank you. So moving back to the episode and the wonderful Jim
stuff
Goldberg.
We really like to do.
I know you really enjoy. Right, exactly. Tell me about your thoughts about the episode. We haven't really talked much about it.
I found it to be so warm, so engaging. And when you and Jim talk about coming and going, you mentioned it was a a book that's accessible but also complex. And that's sort of a perfect description of this work, because Jim is sort of walking this line of telling an incredibly personal story, but also it's work about storytelling in itself. And that's what's really wonderful about that conversation. And it was, I just loved it. Absolutely. So I just want to mention, Jim is someone who likes to tap on the table while talking. And so at certain parts, you're going to hear a little thumping. Don't be alarmed. It's just Jim tapping on the table.
Yeah, we often, just so Jim doesn't feel singled out, we often have guests who do
toe tapping, hand tapping.
Right, there's exactly a lot of that.
Cup of coffee.
This one was particularly hard to edit out. So, but Jim, you are not alone.
No, no. It doesn't hurt the conversation at all. Yeah.
No, and I've had to train myself, by the way.
That's right.
It's not like I got it right from jump. I've had to train myself to really sort of sit quite still while I'm talking, because, so much of our body movements were, okay.
Actually, the nice part of it is you can almost visualize sitting at the table with Jim, and that, and seeing that kind of emphatic sort of, this is what I mean, tap on the table.
Yeah.
That's what I was imagining while I was listening to it.
For sure.
Yep.
Human. All right. Well, look, we've had a long intro here. I'm indulging. I'm basking in my new space. But Why don't we get to it? So, Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure. And here is your conversation with Jim Goldberg.
Jim Goldberg, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know you're super busy.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yep, me too. So we have so much to discuss. I've been trying to get you on for a while, but you had resisted my charm. But you have a new book out, and so made sense for you now to do this so we could talk about it. And I'm so excited to talk about it. It's just an incredible achievement. But before we get into that, if you could do what we do on every podcast, which is have the guests tell the listeners about their journey and where they were born and raised. Did they study photography in school? Just sort of how you got to where you are.
Well, actually going back one step,
yeah.
You had mentioned I had resisted being on. It wasn't the resistance as much to you or talking. It was that I wasn't ready to talk. And I think it's just important for me or for anybody to, if they put themselves out there, to feel confident that they're, saying what they know and being authentic and all those things that are important,
I agree with that.
So now I'm ready, I hope. So I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. And actually, New Haven has sort of figured into my work in many ways, including a book that I did called Candy. And Candy kind of looks at kind of what's happened as New Haven was a model city for all of America, and it was supposed to be the shining city on the hill, and instead it failed miserably, and divided the city with freeways and destroyed neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the stuff that I was growing up with. And I think that it affected me and, going forward and, what I studied. And I actually was a failed theology major. And it was during that time when I was not doing well as a theology student. I started I took a photography course, and that's when I kind of sort of started finding my voice, and that felt right to me, and I pursued that since, and I think that I brought with me this kind of upbringing about dealing with social justice and inequities and issues about race and class, and certainly rich and poor, the work I did about poverty and wealth in America, and then even Raised by Wolves, which talks about running away from home and how I ran away a little, but really how how quickly I wanted to get out of New Haven and to do anything I could. And then Candy, where I go back to New Haven and sort of look at my life and look at two other people's lives and sort of see how we all intertwine. My path has been somewhat circuitous, but at the same time, it's been pretty clearly looking at either other cultures or looking at myself in this new book I just did, Coming and Going.
So let's dive right into sort of the psychology of the way you work. You've talked a lot about, particularly when you're talking about your book, Raised by Wolves, and if people don't know this book, we can talk about it in a little bit, but it's extremely well known, and I think most people do know it. But you've been referred to as someone with real deep empathy, connection to people who may be marginalized, someone who has the ability to confront things that are really difficult with a certain clarity and honesty and directness. And you've also said that sometimes you have felt like an outsider yourself, and that's why you're drawn to other folks who may be considered outsiders, outside the sort of middle class life or, whatever part of society. But I'm just wondering where that sense of being an outsider comes from for you.
Well, I mean, in some ways, everything starts with one's family, and
yep.
And I think that in my family, one of my roles was to just sit and watch and listen. And I had an older brother and sister, and they were, they were different than me. They were more academic. They were more outspoken and social. And I think that I was more withdrawn in many ways. And so I watched and I listened. And I think that, I felt outside. And I think that informed me to perhaps be more sensitive to other people who are outside. I think that's just always been the way I roll, And I'm not sure if I can make this linkage, but this idea of me kind of watching everything in my family or watching everything in the world and listening, and I feel like that's kind of the way that I see also. Mm-hmm. I mean, actually, how I see the world, but also how I also see as an image maker. There's like a multiplicity of views, almost, I've been describing it more like a montage, is the way I see, taking things from different places and putting them together. And I think that's one of the ways that I work. That's one of the ways that inspires me, is not to, follow a straight tonal, almost musical tonal line, but sort of dips and go lows and highs and get discordant. And somehow that complexity sort of adds up to telling a simple story. I mean, a complex, simple story, or a complex story in a simple way. Sorry.
I don't think it's not how I would describe your work, but I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think what's striking about your work, all of your work for the most part, is that it is so filled with complexity, and the form that it takes is complex because you do use many different styles. Sometimes your work is very formal, sometimes it's extremely loose and snapshotty, there's collage, there's text, etc. But with your work, although there's a lot left to the viewer, and there's, of course, the kind of ambiguity that makes work artwork and not a postcard, there's still a directness in your work. When I'm looking at your work, I'm not thinking, I don't understand. What is he saying? I'm not lost. I mean, there's so much work that I look at and I have no idea. If I didn't read the opening essay, I would have no clue.
Well, I guess that's what I meant by I think that the work is very accessible,
Right.
And I mean, that's purposely so. So yes, it's complex in the layers of information or methodologies that I'm using, right? Materials. But it's kind of simple in its accessibility. I guess that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not like it's easy things, but it's done in a way where it's I don't want to say it's enjoyable, but it's not like watching TV and you forget yourself, but I think it's the sequencing and the flow of it is more cinematic than anything. So it brings you in very quickly. It brings the viewer in quickly, and it keeps you in there, hopefully,
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. You and I have talked before. I've told you that I think you're an incredibly confident artist. And I would just say that one of the ways in which I think that manifests is I know a lot of artists who feel out of insecurity that if they don't make the work impenetrable, it won't be elevated enough. It won't be sophisticated enough. And I think one of the wonderful things about your way of working is you do, I think, it seems to me like a lot of the confidence comes from the fact that you are playing with so many different styles and ways of communicating. You have the confidence of knowing that this recipe you're putting together has a million ingredients, right? It's like there's so many ingredients. You don't need to hide the meaning from us or make it impenetrable the way a lot of artists feel that they do. So at the end of the day, it's like, I know what Jim's saying. I understand. And it is really pleasurable and really enjoyable, even when you're dealing, you, Jim, are, presenting us with difficult subjects.
Yeah, and I think I do it in a way that's it's visually hopefully appealing, or a treat in a sense that when you turn the page, you don't know what you're going to see. But also, there's I'm using humor. My father, I come in the beginning of this book, coming and going. I'm away, and I get a call that my father is sick and I have to go back home. But even when I go back home, I talk about, my mother's bad cooking. And, and I think that's in a way, it's, I don't know if it's a comic relief as much as it is that's really what it was like, And I think it's real, and you can feel it, you can feel it. The mood is palpable. So and I like that. I like that happens. And, we can make that happen by using all these different materials.
Yeah, even in Raised by Wolves, there's humor. And part of that humor is just the reality of the lives you're looking at. The people have a sense of humor, right? So it comes out in various ways. Yeah. But let's just clue people into sort of what we're focused on today, which is your new book, Coming and Going, as you mentioned. And it's, just this unbelievable project. So for folks who haven't gotten the book yet, please do get it. It's just published by MACK. It is a very large book. It's physically, not sure what the dimensions are, but very big. And there's hundreds and hundreds of pictures. There are spreads that have tiny, tiny images in collage form. So it's, it can accommodate hundreds of pictures because it's not all on individual pages. But in true Jim Goldberg form, there's a lot of text, some of it one line, some of it a little bit longer, but not in the form of essays. This is just the kind of text you use, letters, ephemera, etc. And it is a story of your life from the time your father got sick in the 80s to, I guess a couple years ago when you probably wrapped the project, or a year ago, whenever it was.
No.
To now.
The last things were made, were right before I went to press.
Okay. To now.
No.
I can't imagine doing anything like this. It's incredibly brutally honest, very raw. In addition to the loss of your father, the loss of your mother, getting married, giving birth to your daughter, Ruby, who I think figures very, very, very prominently in the book in a way that, to me, as a daughter, was just phenomenally moving. The end of your marriage, a new relationship, it's a life story. And I just can't really wrap my brain around doing something so just opening yourself up to this degree to the world. So how did you decide to do this, and what was the process like? Was it comfortable, uncomfortable, both? Just curious about the decision to do something so monumental and personal.
Well, I didn't intend it to be monumental or personal. When I started it, I started in 1999. And, by that point, I was divorced and a single dad, and I wasn't going out in the world as much to photograph or to do anything. I was working and taking care of my daughter, Ruby. And I was offered an artist residency, so I took it, and I brought a pile of stuff, boxes of stuff with me, which were photographs and things I collected and writings and stuff like that. And I spent a week and put together what would become the start of Coming and Going. And then over the years, I went to it, and then I came back to it, and then I left it, and then I came back to it, and on and on. And it was hard to finish it for all kinds of reasons. Life gets in the way is the easiest answer. Mm-hmm. And the longer answer would take a few days, So I really started working on it again intensely. I would go on and off with it, and then I started intensely working, I think, in 2017. And then, so for the past 6 years, I've been working to finish it. And I mean, that's the gist of how it came to be. There's 19 versions of the book, 19 dummies, I make physical maquettes, and also we do it digitally. But my final maquette is this monstrosity of a 11 by 14 inch size handmade book with all the pictures that are now in the final book. And kind of wonderful for me to deal with it physically, because again, when I'm turning a page, there's a microsecond where I can't see what's coming next. And when I do it on a computer, I don't have that same experience. It's scrolling. So I really like the physicality of the book. I mean, just as an art object, but also as a way to not be on the screen and actually make something, which I think was always important to me, is making things.
I assume that you have people around you to act as a brain trust, as advisors, people you feel understand your work the most, you're the most comfortable with,
sure,
to bounce things off of. Was it more difficult hearing comments from people, they're commenting on things that are so personal, or were you able to get some distance in that way, or?
I understand how personal this book is. I think on some level I understand. Probably in some level I can't see it. It's too close to my face, But I do have advisors, and they've changed over the years, or I go back, and forth with people. And I'm really lucky to have them. I live with an advisor. I live with Alessandro Sanguinetti. Right. I mean, I'm blessed. And the questions that I would often ask them weren't necessarily about me, but it was about telling the story, about how to tell the story, and strategizing different ways of telling the story and different methods of telling it. And that took time too. And I think that, one reason why it took so long is that it was still in the oven. It wasn't ready to come out. And I think that the people that I talk to, and also how I talk to myself, is more thinking about what Joan Didion said about, like, we tell ourselves stories in order to live, It gets to the point where the world is really crazy, and our lives are really crazy, all the ups and downs of this, that we go through. And it's really good to have something, in this case for me, a book in which I can make sense of my life and look at it.
Did you learn? Did you learn things about yourself?
Of course.
Yeah.
Including, that I had somehow had the patience to last, so many years in making it. That it was worth it for me to do.
What are the feelings like coming to the end of doing something like this? Is it, I can go through a bit of a depression just if I have something really big I've been prepping for a while, and then whatever it is, it could be a lecture, it could be a hike I'm scared of because it's probably, a little beyond my physical means, whatever it is, I can have like a little bit of a letdown, right? A little depression after something What was it like coming to the end of this process?
Great. Fucking great. Really. I mean, it's a relief. I'm like, it's off my shoulders. I have other things on my shoulders now, but that's a different story. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, my back hurts a little bit, but that's from it, but that's fine. Mm-hmm. But no depression, just really, it's almost like
just elation.
And redemption or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and also,
that's wonderful.
I mean, that the way that the book is set up too, which I haven't explained much, but the last pages of the book is like a zooming out of a bunch of pictures, and those bunch of pictures is part of what was on my wall in my studio, which was about 25 feet by 10 feet high, and it was just pictures, the pictures that I've collected. And so in the book, you start off a little bit closer, and then by the end, you zoom out, and it's like how there's just so many pictures. There's so much going on in one life, but it still goes on. And even the ending, even on the back of my book, I'm saying still going. It's just like, it just keeps going. It's all part of the same story. For me, it's all part of my story, and it's exciting. It's exciting to keep telling it, and be.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, hopefully,
One thing I didn't, hopefully, but one thing I didn't, I thought I had mentioned to you before, I'm not sure if I did, but that this book, The Last Son, I had done with Super Labo, which is also, it's really about the start of my photography, of doing it, taking it seriously, seeing. And this is one of the things that got in the way of me finishing Coming and Going. So I did that. And where that book ends is where Coming and Going begins. So I'm just thinking about continuation. So that book ends with my mother, with me saying, I think, good news, ? And what the good news was, this is a conversation with my parents that's printed in the book, is the good news we find out later is that I was given money. I was getting a insurance check from my father's disability insurance. And with that, I started traveling and photographing. And it was on one of these trips that I got a call that my father was sick and I had to come back to visit. And that's where Coming and Going begins.
So let me ask you a more sort of specific question.
Sure.
And I think it's something that, I think everyone who knows your work would want to ask you about, and that's about using text. And in an interview you did with Sean O'Hagan at The Guardian, you said this: there's so much going on in this book, because I collect so many images and then sift through them all to find meaning. Although I have a real love for the power of photography, I also have a sense of deep insecurity that a picture can say it all. I feel I have to add to it in order to somehow grow the work, to make it become better art, essentially. So let's just, let's just get into the text concept, because I think it's become more popular. Maybe my imagination, but I think people have become more comfortable using text. Yeah. And when I say that, I do not mean essays. I mean the way you use text. And it could even be, there have been some books in the past couple of years that have come out where people have combined their photography with their poetry. You see it in different ways, but I'm not talking about the essay that someone writes about your work or whatever in a book. So you've been using text for a very long time. Have your feelings about it changed? I mean, do you feel, fully secure now in this way of working? How do you think about it?
I don't know if I ever feel fully secure. I think that, I'm filled with doubt all the time. And, that's just the way I roll too. And I don't let it stymie me. I push on through it. I'm disciplined enough, and I know myself well enough. But that said, I think it's because of those doubts that I question the ways that I use text and try to experiment and mutate the ways that I do it. It's slight, but there's a constant experimentation as I apply it to new work that I make. So when I started using text, I mean, first of all, I believe in I believe in the beautiful singular image. I really do. I want to keep trying to make those, but I always feel like as you quoted, that there's something else I could add to it. And I feel like text is definitely one additive feature. And, in Rich and Poor, people wrote directly on their photographs, whereas in Raised by Wolves, people wrote on pieces of paper that I incorporated into the book. And so in the first one, in Rich and Poor, the writing directly reflects what the picture is about, or doesn't, or counteracts it. It contradicts it. And in Raised by Wolves, the text is used and pieced together with pictures that may not be the person speaking. And that one of the reasons for that was to protect their identities.
Yeah,
because they were kids. Yep. So, by mixing it all up, it fictionalizes it in a way that makes it okay that they're not identifiable, at least at the time. Most of the people in Raised by Wolves are over 50 years old now, Yeah.
Some of whom I know you still are in contact with. Some have passed away. Some have.
So I don't know if that answers the question about text, because, I'm doing this new project in Arkansas, and I did this long-ass collage, like 27 feet long collage of a river, in which I took just words and phrases from the small town this area where I'm working in Arkansas, and pieced them together along this river collage, and which was called Whirlpool. And I mean, that's like just using pieces of sentences, So that's another way that I'm just trying to figure out how to tell us a narrative, use a narrative form, and make it so that I take my understanding of it and make it relatable to you, the viewer, and also try to be indigenous to the place or people that I'm working with, including myself in this book.
You asked me a second ago if you had answered the question, and I think the best part of this answer is, as far as, what might be interesting to the people who listen to this podcast, is that everything should be a rigorous exercise, right? That nothing should be easy. I mean, you are constantly challenging yourself to come up with the exact right form for the project. So even though you've used text most of your career, if not your whole career, you're constantly changing up how you use it to best suit the project. And you're not going to know that automatically. I mean, these are things that, what makes a great artist, aside from innate talent and whatnot, is working really hard, right? I mean, that's something that I say all the time when I'm talking to folks who are starting out or students, whatever, is, don't forget to work really hard, especially when using a camera, or particularly a large format camera that can do so much of the work for you. The mental part of it should be grueling to me. And that doesn't mean you don't have moments of great, because I suspect that in your process, there are moments of real flow. And of course, some of my favorite artists have work that has that kind of feeling about it, where they were probably letting their inner life, their subconscious guide. So I'm not talking about always being sort of working from a place that's, very didactic, or what's the word? I can't think of the word, but ultimately a project needs rigor. You need to make decisions, right? And not have sort of just let decisions be made for you. And it's weird how often that seems to happen. But so I think your answer was really interesting. And it's great to hear that, that struggle of deciding how to match, it's not just, the answer isn't just, yes, I use text and here's why. It's about finding the exact right way of using it.
Yes, exactly. And you touched on lots of things that you just talked about. So I don't know if I can address them all, but
go ahead.
Try. One, I mean, I go out in the world and let's say I document it with a camera or a film, or a movie, making a video or something, or a film. And then I come back in the studio and that's where I make things. I look at them, I put them on the wall, or I physically work on them, or I color them or paint them or whatever. That thing that I do is like play. And I'm knocking on wood now that it doesn't stop, but I tend to be able to continue to play.
Yeah, which is amazing.
And,
what a gift.
Knock on wood. And so that playfulness, one helps the ride, that because
of course.
because
Holy cow.
I honestly start the play with doubt. Whatever my doubts are. But then I push through it, and rigor and discipline, and I push through it and I play. And then the other thing that often works with me is that I have, I use my intuition. I have no choice but to use my intuition. It's just what I have. It's one of the strengths that I have. So when I'm using my intuition and I'm playing, then sometimes that flow is at its height. And, time goes very quickly then, and I run out of time because I want to keep doing it. And so when and sometimes I'll get that if I'm sequencing in a book, because I'll think of new ways of creating an experience. So I have books that I make are accordion books at Leporello, so I can cut pages out and replace them and move things around in an effortless way. Well, not effortless. It hurts my shoulders sometimes, but I move it around and I have a sensory experience that's completely different, and it gives me another way of thinking of the approach of how to tell that story.
I mean, I've told you that I think of this book a lot. It reminded me of certain type of jazz, which of course you automatically told me you think of it more like punk rock, which I totally understand. But I'm going to stick with my jazz thing, where it really reminds me of when you're listening to, whether it's John Coltrane or Dave Brubeck or whoever, these are just people I like to listen to, and a song starts and you know the song. You hear the bones of like Camptown Races or whatever the heck it is. And then they're off, right? And the bones of the song, the melodies is gone. And we're into this just kaleidoscopic sort of crazy space. And then other people in the band are soloing, and it's gone just, from a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we're off into outer space. And the next thing you know, somehow it comes back and you hear the melody again to the song that you know, and you're back in that space and you get it. You understand it all. And that's how I felt about this book. And I think that is so much about what you're saying. It's like you build a structure, it's a sound structure, then you get to play and trust your intuition. And even though you have doubts, you push through them and you trust to play and have fun, that it's going to work out. And guess what? It worked out. I mean, it's really incredible. I really, really hope people hear this and think about whether that way of working can translate to their process a bit, or they can get something out of that.
I mean, you talk, speaking of music and jazz, I mean, I am involved with jazz here and at the San Francisco Jazz Center. So it is part of what I listen to, but I listen to all kinds of music, and it influences how I'm working during the day. And
oh, wow. That's great.
So, like my daughter, Kat, she looked at my Spotify numbers of like how many different things I listened to. And she was, I don't know if she was impressed. I think she was impressed. I don't know. Of
wow, way to go. 'Cause she's
like,
a teenager,
yeah,
isn't
exactly. And so there are moments where, she understands how I'm okay. So
the old guy's okay.
So no, but I always think about when I'm making work, be it an exhibition or a book or anything, is about music and about the musicality, the tones, which I started talking about earlier, I think today. the tones in a book and how I don't want it to be atonal. I really want to change it up some. So sometimes it might have a melody in there, and then it would get discordant like punk or discordant like jazz. And then maybe it will bring in something from left or right field, that you weren't expecting. I remember, one show I did with Raised by Wolves in which I played opera, which was, the opposite of the music that you would think of with these kids. But there was something about, the operatic story that seemed resonant with them. Age old story about children being cast out by their parents. Opera represents those long-term stories
tragic
that we tell each other.
One thing that I really love about this project, and is also really prevalent in your new work in Arkansas, which I had the pleasure of seeing some of. I know it's a big project. I saw some of it at the High Museum in Atlanta a year ago.
Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, maybe a little longer. I have the worst sense of time. Anyway, the combination of... In this book, there's not very many of them. With the Arkansas project, there's, I think, quite a bit more. But the mixing of very formal images with very informal images. I touched on that a little bit earlier when I was just describing the project. But can you tell me a bit about how you feel about making, like, the individual image, and how you decide, like in this book, there really are not that many of these very, very formal images. And as I said, in the Arkansas project, there are quite a few from what I've seen of these very straight, large format, more confrontational portraits, things like that. So, how do you think about the different types of work that you make formally?
Well, again, they're kind of all ingredients in the recipe.
Do you prefer making one type of picture over another? I know that's a silly question, but I'm just pushing you.
No, but I try to play and do both. So even if I'm taking a formal picture, I'll go and I'll turn the camera so that it's crooked. I remind myself to do that all the time. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't, but it seems that it seems like it's a possibility that it could give another feeling, and feelings add up to create a larger, for the larger good, perhaps. So, I'm taking from here, I'm taking from there, and a formal picture it tells the viewer, it tells us one thing, it resonates in us in different ways than a more chaotic picture or a collage. So I try to pace them through my work so that when you need to be drawn in and have that kind of, not formalistic, when you have that, 4x5 large format, Michael Disfarmer-like pictures that you're looking at of people in Arkansas, it's because I did a pop-up studio like he did, or like the Prellers who lived on a houseboat in the community where I was photographing. They did the same thing. So out of respect for them too, and for the community, I wanted to make pictures that they would want to put on their walls. And, an out of focus picture or a crooked picture people don't want for their walls. So that was a decision, that would be the best for the community. It would be best for me to be able to get access to the community by taking their pictures, and then also as a fairly easy way to give back to the community.
When did you decide that? That's so interesting. I mean, talk a little bit about setting up a studio and.
Because I had this commission through the High Museum for their Picturing the South collection. And I decided, not in a very direct way, to work in Arkansas. One had to photograph in the South. So I decided to work in Arkansas. One thing and one person led to another person to another thing, and I ended up in these two towns in the Delta area. And so I settled in there. I've been working there since exactly at the beginning of the pandemic, since 2020. So I'm hoping to go back in the spring, and I don't know if I'll finish up, but perhaps finish up the project. And so I decided, in looking at the pictures that they knew in their history of this farmer's photographs, which was done in Heber Springs, which is not very far away from where these towns are, and also the Prellers who lived in the town themselves and did a similar kind of studio setup on their boat, I decided to mirror that, mimic that.
Yeah, that's so brilliant.
And I did it again. It was the day that I got there was the day that it was obvious that the pandemic had started and that I didn't know if I would be able to get back home. Because it was, didn't know if airlines were closing down or would I have to rent a car. And so I just pushed on working there, feeling like the world was closing in, and at the same time, just focused on getting these portraits done, and I've done it a couple of times and I may do it again. It's completely enjoyable, assuming that the lighting is right and, the camera's set up perfectly and all that kind of stuff. That's important.
Well, it's a great project. And once again, I mean, you mention enjoyable, fun, play. I mean, these are such important things for people to keep in mind. It's important to love what you're doing. And it doesn't mean you're not going to struggle, but man, is it important. So let me just ask you about working with MACK, because I think this was the first time that you worked with them on this book. And whatever you feel comfortable saying, but yeah, what was that experience like? Because I mean, personally have just a ton of respect for Michael Mack and for Morgan Crowcroft Brown. I think I said that right. And the folks over there who just do a tremendous job.
Well, actually, I have worked with Michael earlier on.
You did? Well, on what?
Well, Raised by Wolves I did with Walter Keller at Scalo.
Right.
And it's because of Walter Keller that we have so many photo books now. And that's a whole nother story why. But he started Scalo and was putting out these, what I think are pretty seminal books. And when Michael knew that he wanted to become, Michael was studying architecture, I think, and then he was a lawyer. But he really wanted to do something with bookmaking. And I think that and Walter Keller, when Scalo went under, was absorbed by Steidl. Steidl printed all of Scalo's books. So then now Steidl became the publisher, and Michael worked at Steidl. And there was a MACK editions. And so I did a MACK edition with him of Open Sea. I did a special edition of those with him. And then I guess, I don't know when we committed to working on this book together. Maybe it was 2017, but it's probably that long. I mean, Michael was very patient, very supportive of me. Like, I cannot complain in any way.
No, that's wonderful.
So that went really, really well. That went really, really well. And, Morgan is fantastic. And, his team is fantastic. It's a really smart business model. There's other people that put out good books too, but Michael certainly has done really well with many of the books that he's published.
Yeah, no, I just got a copy of Ramel Ross's new book, which they just published, and so it feels like they are really just exemplary doing. The photo book is the gold, right? So, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, there's a lot of photo books now. There's too many photo books. So that's a whole nother problem. And so how to sort of navigate through the amount of them is always a challenge.
There are a lot, but I've reconciled myself to that, and I think that at the end of the day, it's a really good problem to have. There are very few exhibition opportunities, and in the history of photography as a art form, there have been very few exhibition opportunities, but there were quite a few more a number of years ago during my 21 year career doing this. At one point there were quite a few more, and they've shrunk down, and so I'm happy to see the photo book taking the place of, and frankly, no one, so few people get to see exhibitions that it's really wonderful to have the book. And in a lot of ways, this is, the way I feel about streaming, right? Like, I love a movie theater. I mean, I love going to the movies. I love the whole ritual of it. But, when I was younger, there were so many more theaters where you could see the type of movies I was interested in seeing, and there's just not very many now. And so I'm glad I can see those movies on, whatever, Apple TV or Netflix or whatever it is. And even if I have to wade through a lot of junk, I'm still grateful for that opportunity. So as someone with piles of photo books around, yes, there are a lot. So many gems. So I feel really blessed. Anyway, Jim, thank you. I'm sorry I ended this on a lecture from me, but thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I don't know if I hope I don't know if there's anything that we forgot to talk about.
Well, there's always a million things that, especially as someone who's had such an incredible career, that word is always so strange, but I'm up for a part 2. We can go back and do a retrospective. I love your work. I really, really love talking to you. So I'll start working on you for a part 2, and
good luck.
We'll see when I wear you down.
Yeah. Well,
but everyone should get this book. No, thank you. The book's called Coming and Going. It's so special, people. So please get it. And yeah, Jim, you take care.
Can I ask you a question? You're saying goodbye to me, but can I ask you a question? Why do you think it's so special?
I think for the reasons we talked about in the beginning. And this is very important to me.
I mean, I'm not asking for a compliment here. I'm just curious on what the components are that make it.
Yeah, I think the fact that it walks the line so perfectly of being at times and in ways enigmatic and open for interpretation, but ultimately so clear that, and it's, again, it goes back to that sort of jazz metaphor. I don't know if it's a metaphor, but, that we get taken on this incredible journey. We're not always sure where we're going, but we wind up someplace clear and relatable and solid, and that the journey was beautiful and moving, and that, like life, it's very, very, very funny, very sad, extremely moving. Whether you're a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, whatever you are, there's a place for you in this book.
So it has a universal quality, I guess.
Oh, definitely. Without a doubt. So, and maybe you and I have certain overlap in our lives that, make me relate to certain things a bit more, but I don't think so. I mean, I think we do, yes, but I don't think that's it. I think it's just, it's a book about family and about a life. And
right.
I think, again, that it's generous in its willingness to be both generous and confident in its willingness to be clear about what ultimately it's saying, even if what it's saying is open-ended like life is, right? Even if there are no answers, it's not about that, right? It's just about showing a journey, but showing that journey clearly. So
yeah, there's no answers. It's just history and memory. I mean, that's what this book is about. In some ways, it's just it's this fluid thing. It's not, the truth is not it's not fixed, it's an approximation. So that's what this book is it's an approximation of my life in a way. But as you said,
and other
people's lives, I guess. So
yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you
put
you on the spot.
No, not at all. Not at all. Happy to talk about it because I loved it. So I love it. All right. Well, again, you take care of yourself. Say hello to Alessandra for me and Kat and Ruby. And I look forward to seeing you one of these days.
Okay. Thanks, Sasha.
Okay, Jim. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, everyone. So just a shout out for our sponsor, Picture House in the Small Darkroom. They've been an incredible partner for us this season for the podcast, and we're just so grateful to have them, and not just because they're sponsoring, but because we really love those guys, and we're actually doing a lot of stuff with them that we'll announce later, things that have to do with some programs the foundation is going to launch. So it's really gone from just sponsoring the podcast to a much deeper relationship. And I think that just says a lot about their values, how supportive they are of the foundation, of the PhotoWork Foundation, and how much they want to help out. And as everyone knows, I've been over there a lot to discuss things with them, and I have artists who print with them, work on various post projects with them. And it's just, everyone loves hanging out over there. At the lab, you say lab, it sounds so sterile, but it's like this really cool space. It's on a number of floors and in Chelsea and New York.
Yeah, they call it their studio.
Right.
And they're an incredible resource. So it's a film lab. They do scanning, printing, retouching. They sell film. And of course, they have a bookstore with live events. And they have a mini lab where you can have prints made of all different sizes.
Love the mini lab.
They are Picture House in the Small Darkroom. Their website is PHTSDR for Picture House, the Small Darkroom.com. And so is their Instagram, PHTSDR. And you can check out the Instagram or the website to see if they're having specials or what's going on at the bookstore. And again, it's an incredible place to have in New York.
And you don't have to be in New York. You can send them in film, start a relationship with those guys. They will take care of you, I promise. That's who they are. They are really committed to doing a great job for everyone, whoever you are, whether you're a big shot or a small shot. So, so check them out.
Absolutely. PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is a production of the PhotoWork Foundation. Executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and the associate producer is Taylor Selsback. The show is also produced and edited by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. Music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show and wish to find out more about the Foundation, please visit photowork.foundation and be sure to subscribe and review with all the stars on your listening platform.